The time is here for the Premier League season 23-24. It's 1 week away, so that means it's time for my Premier League predictions for next season. Let's see what happens. Who's going down? Who's going to win the league? Will I relegate a team that's never been relegated before? Will a newly promoted team survive the drop? Will we have new Premier League champions, or will Manchester City and Pep Guardiola win an unprecedented 4th Premier League title in a row? Let's get into it. But before we do, if you like the video now, your team will finish 2 places higher than what I predict. First up, worst team in the Premier League, Sheffield United. They lost their best player and die for 17 million to Marseille. That just doesn't stretch very far at all anymore. They've barely spent on players since 2020. I honestly think Derby's point record of 11 might be at risk this season. Their best players are now Ahmed Zozic in centre-back and Sana Burge in midfield. Honestly, they've got problems up front. Brewster and McBurney, they're championship at best. I honestly don't see anything but relegation for Sheffield United this season. 19th, Luton Town. They've managed to sign the Canberra on a permanent. Their manager seems like a good guy. I'm not sure that's enough. They've spent mostly on their fullbacks, but in total it's about 17 million. Although they've managed to recruit for way below the player's market value, about a 10 million difference. Morris has really good stats from last season, but that's all to be seen in the Premier League. Lockyer is an absolute Rolls Royce in defence. People are raving about him. I'm not sure that's going to be enough. Other teams around the drop last season have strengthened, and I think it will leave Luton behind as a newly promoted team. They're not going to be strong enough. They're going down. 18th place, Everton. Everton, honestly, they finished last season in 17th. They haven't looked good for the last few years. They've been toying with relegation. Even though they've never been relegated, I think this is their time. It's up. They've sold Sims. Dominic Calvert-Lewin is always injured. You cannot rely on him. Dele Alli had a really big interview at the start of the season. Let's see if he can put that behind him. Honestly, for me, he has to perform if Everton have any chance of survival. They got a toxic board-fan relationship. That plays a part whether you like it or not. That will affect the players. A new stadium for a new league. That's what I'm thinking. They get relegated. They play in their new stadium. Time for a fresh start. Last season, Dyche only averaged 1.17 points per game. That's pretty much a draw a game. And I think they've got worse, and other teams around them have got better. It's time for Everton to go for me. That's the relegation sides done. If you're liking the video, make sure to drop a like and subscribe, because we're on our way to 1,000 subscribers before the start of the Premier League season. So do what you can and share it to your mates. Let's crack on with the rest of the Premier League table. 17th, Crystal Palace. They've sold Zaha and they've still got Roy Hodgson in charge. It's all too romantic with Roy, and losing Zaha could be a real problem for them. Without Zaha, last season under Vieira, they were almost destined for doom. Have they improved? No, they've got worse. I don't see you scoring him goals now Zaha's gone. Edouard won't be it. If they're going to succeed this season and survive the drop, they need to rely on Eze and Elise to do the business for them, and maybe some new potential incomings from South America. However, Palace, they won't go down. I don't know where the goals come from. Wouldn't be shocked if they do drop though. Lerma's a good signing but ill-disciplined. Palace, pretty boring season for you and your fans. I wouldn't get too excited. Next up, Wolves, 16th place. Lopetegui's a good manager, but he's not going to hang around. They're in a mess. The club is all over the place. They've lost Jimenez for pittance. He's not been scoring since that injury though. Collins, good centre-back, but he's gone to Brentford. That squad's been dismantled over the last few seasons. It wasn't that long ago. It was the Portuguese national side playing in the Premier League. Obviously, Neves has moved on to Saudi Arabia. I'm worried about Wolves. I think they've got enough in them to survive, but honestly, they need to get busy. They spent 50 million on Cunha, who's been absolutely dreadful everywhere he's been, bar the weekend league on FIFA for the last few seasons. It's a joke for me. Prem stalwarts are gone, and so's their best player. They've got to get busy, like I said. Teams around them will move past them very easily this season. Wolves are caught in complacency at the moment. Dark days ahead for Wolves unless they can sort it out. I think they'll survive, but next season could be their time. Burnley, they're in 15th for me. Newly promoted team. They spent the biggest of the newly promoted teams, about 65 million. Their player valuation of those transfers is more around 80. So they've spent really wisely. Company, great manager. He's well respected. I think people want to play for Vincent Company. He obviously had him playing fantastic football and got a really early promotion last season. They're looking to stay in the Premier League. They're not here for fun. They're looking to cement themselves back in the Premier League. Young players in the squad will be hungry. Zeki Amdouni looks like a hot prospect. Very exciting young player. They haven't really lost any essential players from that squad last season. They could even go higher if they manage to get to the grips with the Prem early on. 14th place for me, West Ham. I can't see him going down. They've still got a few good players. Jared Bowen still in the squad. They've got 100 million in the bank to spend as well. Old squad though, it needs young legs being brought in. They haven't bought anyone, which is really important right now. Even with no one in, I still don't think they'll get relegated. What I do think this season is Moyes will get sacked. They'll bring someone in who will keep them above water. They need to recruit. They need to recruit young and they need to recruit good players. I'm not sure what the future holds for West Ham. I don't know where it's going to go after losing Declan Rice and winning last season and having Europe again. Surely they want to keep building and giving their fans something to sing about. How big is that Rice loss going to be? Let's see what happens. I think they're going to get busy around deadline day and they'll be all right. 13th, Nottingham Forest. Steve Cooper has had time. He's now got an understanding of a jam-packed squad. He's moved some baggage on though. Jesse Lingard and a couple of others are on their way. I'm not sure about Forest. It all seems a bit scruffy to me. There's rumours about unpaid wages. That doesn't look good for a team who are going to be fighting for survival in the Premier League. However, I think they'll do better than last season. It just all seems a bit scruffy though. I don't think they've got long in the top flight. It's all going to end in tears. And for now, they'll be safe. But I'm not too sure about the future of Nottingham Forest. Anyway, let's move on to Bournemouth. They're going to be 12th this year. Gary O'Neill's gone. That's the headline. Such a favoured, lovable manager by the fans. He did so well for them last season. But he's on his way. That means Bournemouth and the board expect him to move only one way, and that's up. They've bought in Areola from Valenciano. This guy as a player had over 400 games for Bilbao. He's a top pro. He knows the top level Spanish division like the back of his hand. And honestly, I think he'll do all right. He's a young coach. He's got fresh ideas. He's going to be hungry and he'll get him playing nice football. I expect more incomings. We've seen Justin Kluivert join Bournemouth as well this season. Clubs below could move past them though if they don't get busy sorting themselves out. But for now, positive start for Bournemouth ahead and I think they'll do okay this season. Moving into 11th, Fulham. Weird season ahead for them. Obviously Marco Silva's committed, but if he's not backed, I can't see him staying for long. They're losing some good players. They've got the oldest squad about. Mitrovic doesn't want to be there. Honestly, if he doesn't want to be there, it's time to get rid. I know the money you got offered isn't enough, but there's no point keeping a bad apple around. Bassi is a good signing. I like the look of him. I also like the look of Jimenez 5 seasons ago before the head injury. I just don't think he's the same anymore. If Fulham end up relying on Jimenez to do the job from up front, they're going to struggle. I think mid-table is probably where they're going to end up this season, but I honestly don't see him improving. They're looking at wingers to recruit. They need to add some youth to this side as well. I don't really know where their goals are going to be coming from. Weaknesses will show this season for Fulham, and I think they could be susceptible to a couple of heavy defeats. Moving into 10th place, Brentford will be at the bottom of the top half. Tony's out till late Jan, but even then I think he'll be on the move. I think Brentford are already preparing for life after Tony. Strikers will contribute goals over players, so they won't be reliant on just one player. There'll be 3 or 4 players contributing most of Brentford's goals this season, I think. They lost Ericsson before. People said, how will they survive? They did. They've lost Tony. I think they'll be all right again. I don't see him improving on last year. I think 10th will be a really strong finish for them, considering what's happened. Raya's going to be on his way as well. That could be a loss. They've raided Freiburg. Their recruitment's always good. They've managed to sign the goalkeeper Flecken and Shard on a permanent as well. He looks exciting and he's rapid. Frank is a clued up manager. He's realistic. Unless he gets headhunted, Brentford will be all right. Mid-table for them without Tony, like I said, is a solid season. And they'll look to move on from there in the coming years. 9th, Spurs. Honestly, I think this could even be generous for Spurs if they lose Harry Kane. That's the name. If he goes, expect the worst. Ange loves to attack, and he's going heavy on attacking recruitment. But I think he might get found out defensively. they just don't look too solid to me, Spurs. And if they lose Harry, then I don't know what will happen. They'll get good money, but I'm not sure they'll spend it well. They'll probably go big on someone to just try and replicate that amount of goals. And just going to have a big test. I don't see them improving. I think if Kane goes, they can end up bottom half. If he stays, they'll do okay, but still won't get Europe. Solomon looked all right at Fulham, but he's pretty predictable. A couple of other incomings. Maddison, I feel a bit sorry for him joining Spurs. I think he could have got a Champions League level club. The owner crisis as well is obviously a bit rocky. You don't want that going on in the background. I know that as a Chelsea fan. A bad season on the cards for Spurs for me. 8th place, Brighton. They lost a lot of quality over the summer, but they've obviously recruited well again. Some unknown players have come in, and some players who have been about the European leagues for a while are sort of coming in to fill the void. Potter had them on good momentum last year. De Zerbi come in and carried and pushed them forward. They look okay in pre-season, but probably once they get going and back into their stride, they'll be all right. Welbeck seems to be putting the ball away, and João Pedro looks like a good addition to their strike force. The Hood replaces McAllister. I saw him play a few years ago for Mönchengladbach. Looks like a real nice player in midfield, tight dribbling and good in tight areas as well. I think he'll be a good replacement for McAllister. Milner is steady legs and a great pro. What a player to get in and around, especially with Europe on the cards. I think that will stretch the squad, and it'll be interesting to see how they do. De Zerbi's done well in Europe before at Shakhtar. But honestly, I think what will happen is they'll struggle with the Premier League whilst they're in Europe. And then when they're out of Europe, they'll regain in the Prem. And he's a good manager. I just think that small squad is going to be stretched, even though they'll pull some magicians out the bag from Peru and other places across the globe. And they'll do all right. Hopefully, they don't lose too many more players. But don't forget, they get massive, massive amounts of money in the bank every summer from huge, huge transfer fees. Brighton will do okay, but will finish a little bit lower than last season. Great manager De Zerbi. This season will show what he's really made of. 7th, Aston Villa. They've looked average in pre-season. A lot is being made about their recruitment. They've spent a lot. They've bought in Diaby, Pau Torres, Tielemans even on a free. How good and how consistent can these players be over the season? Diaby's obviously looked good in the Bundesliga. Pau Torres never obviously been tested in the Prem and looked woeful at times for Spain. Tielemans, an interesting player, but why did he not go to a better team? All sort of doesn't make sense to me at the moment. Emery is a good coach though, and I'm sure if he can blend it all together, they'll be getting Europe again. I think they're probably going to go and win the Conference League as well, so don't be surprised if they end up in the Europa League next season. When he took over last year, he had Villa second on form in that whole time he was in charge. So look, Unai knows what he's doing. They're a good team and good times are ahead for Aston Villa. They'll do well and will get Europe next season. 6th place, Newcastle United. That's right, they're dropping out of the top 4. They've got the Champions League though, and that'll be a lot of fun for them, but I think that's the reason for the drop. This will test the squad. They've recruited really nice, steady recruitment. A lot of money on a couple of players here and there. They're building that squad up to be a really strong squad, but they're doing it wisely and smartly and assessing every position that needs adjusting or a new player coming in. I worry about them defensively. If they lose a couple of players to injury, then I'm not so sure about how they look defensively. But Tonali's come in, big club player on big money, and Barnes is a great buy from Leicester. Newcastle will have fun in the Champions League. Eddie seems to be getting better, and I'm sure they're going to surprise a lot of teams across Europe. I think there's a lot of models around for Newcastle to learn from, and I think in the next few seasons, they will just keep getting better and better. Expect to see them in and around the top 4 a lot more often over the next decade. How reliable are those strikers, though? I feel like they've been injured more than they've scored goals in their last few seasons. But look, on their day, when they're fit, they're top quality players. I'm not sure how it goes for Newcastle this year with Europe on the agenda, but they'll do all right and they'll have Europe again next season. We're moving into the battle for top 4 and the fight for the Premier League title. I want you, though, to let me know in the comments who your top 4 and relegated 3 teams are right now. So go and do it. Let me know in the comments who you think will be relegated and who will be in the top 4 this season. 5th, Chelsea, Poch and his boys. I don't see him cracking into the top 4 just yet. They're looking to recover and prove people wrong from last year. There's no Europe to worry about, and I think Poch is going to go heavy on the domestic competitions. He wants English silverware under his belt because he failed to do it with Spurs the last time he was here. He'll want Europe, though, and he'll make a very, very strong, fit Chelsea team. They've got a clear path at doing that, but I'm not sure it'll be enough. They've got big weaknesses at the club, even though they've had a massive clear out and got rid of some toxic players. Mason Mount, Kai Havertz, Kovacic, you name it. The players you knew from Chelsea Football Club aren't there anymore. They're back with a new look team, the youngest in the Premier League, of hungry players who are here for the long term to succeed at Chelsea. It won't happen just yet, but they will be back in Europe and in the Champions League. I mean, Europa League probably on the cards for Chelsea next season. But for now, I'm hoping they can call last season a blip and they'll be fighting for the top 4 again. Moving on from Chelsea, Liverpool in 4th place. They've made some good signings. Szoboszlai and McAllister seem like good buys. Their front line is already very good as well. They got Salah, the 30-goal a season man. Núñez should be in for a big season. Don't forget the hype around him last season. It was Núñez or Haaland. Haaland obviously went on to have a phenomenal season and Núñez really never got going. But this season, I think he will. Last season might just be an adjustment season. Gakpo and Diaz, they're going to go big too. The midfield has been dismantled. Actually, it's been absolutely destroyed. A proper demolition job. Milner, Hendo, Fabinho, Keita, Carvalho, they're all gone. Liverpool's midfield doesn't look anywhere near the same midfield that it did for the last few years. I'm sure they will still recruit and add good players. They've got some good money back for Fabinho, Hendo. Even Bobby Firmino's gone, which I'm sure Liverpool fans didn't want to sell. They'll do okay though, and I think they'll do better than last year and they'll be back in the top 4. I'm not sure they'll be able to challenge for the title unless they really sort that midfield out and the defence can get back to where we've seen it before. All of that really rests on how good VVD can be again. If he can get back to how good he once was, then there you go. Liverpool could even push on higher than 4th. I want to know what Trent's future looks like as well. What position is it going to be in? Obviously, if he moves into midfield, then I expect him to recruit at right back. Let's see what Klopp can do. The guy seems like a genius, but in a similar position when he was at Dortmund and the squad needed rebuilding, he was out the door. Let's see what he can do at Liverpool. I expect top 4. 3rd place, Manchester United. Ten Hag has done nothing but impress me bar that first game of the season last year when they got absolutely destroyed, or very early on anyway. I think, to be honest with you, they've recruited okay in the transfer window, but they seem to have overspent. I don't think Mount's as good as what people are hyping him up to be, even though there are times that Chelsea's a very, very good player. He hasn't looked too good in pre-season. They've obviously moved Harry Maguire off captaincy for Bruno, which is a great move in my opinion. This is why Ten Hag knows what he's doing. They got rid of David De Gea, who made mistake after mistake, for Onana, who will probably make mistake after mistake, to be honest with you. Højlund's coming up front for a lot of money. I'm not sure he's good enough to pull them up a few positions. For now, they'll stay in 3rd place. Ten Hag is cooking. I expect them to be better than they were last season. They will close the gap, and I'm sure he'll have some sort of silverware under his belt again for Manchester United. 2nd, Manchester City. That's right. I don't think Manchester City will win an unprecedented 4th. They've lost and are losing some big players. Mahrez is out the door, and don't underestimate the departure of İlkay Gundogan, one of the best players in the world, and he's done so well for Manchester City the last few seasons. He's gone out on a treble. Pep's never won 4 in a row. He's got a couple of trebles, but he's never done 4 in a row. It could be a burnout as well. Look at Liverpool last year when they played every game the previous season before. They were just burnt out and not the same last season. So that's interesting to see how Manchester City adapt to that. Although Haaland could win the league on his own, don't forget the likes of Jack Grealish, Phil Foden. These players are going to have massive seasons this year with players moving. They'll move into the squad and I'm sure they'll put up really, really good numbers. This is Foden's year. That's what I'm saying for Manchester City. But look, Pep is Pep. Don't be shocked if they get 4 Premier Leagues in a row. They've won 5 of the last 6. All he has to do is just motivate a couple of new players that will probably end up joining his team. And motivating them as well from winning a treble. Can they do better? And there we have it. Arsenal will be Premier League champions in the 23-24 Premier League season. Last year will only make them hungrier and they want to prove all the doubters wrong. They're not bottle jobs. Last year, they looked really, really good for a long time, but right at the end, they sort of faded away. This year they've added and they've strengthened in a lot of areas, literally up front, midfield and defence. Balogun's still around, one of the best young strikers in Europe last season. They got Saka, who's getting better every season. Jesus, though, he's got another injury. I'm worried about him going forward. Arsenal's weakest area right now is probably their striker. I really think they need to get someone in who's guaranteed 25 goals a season. I do think they'll improve. Arteta seems like a really, really good coach. He's transformed this squad. Good recruitment from the directors and the board. More to come from Arsenal. I do think it's a matter of when, not if, with the Premier League title again. I think Manchester City will push them and push them very, very close. But I honestly think and expect Arsenal to have enough and learn from last season's mistakes. They will do okay. I actually almost imagine them sort of putting the Champions League aside and focusing on winning that first Premier League title in the Arteta era. They seem to have sorted squad depth. My biggest concern, though, like I said, is the striker. If they can get fit and get enough goals from everywhere else on the pitch, they'll be okay. And Declan Rice in midfield is a fantastic signing. And there you have it. My 23-24 season predictions are in. I'm locking them in. Let's see what happens at the end of the season. I'll make a video reacting to how bad these probably were. If you're happy with where your team is, let me know in the comments. But if you're not, drop me a comment on where you think your team's going to finish and what you think your team needs to do to improve on my predictions. I'll catch you in the next one. And for now, enjoy the last week of pre-season.